It's a great honor of mine and my family that we happened to meet a few weeks ago, a Medal of Honor recipient by the name of Sergeant First Class Leroy Petry. All of you on the Dark Secret Place, you know to do your homework, to go to the Facebook page, which is Dark Secret Place on KFI Los Angeles, and read the Medal of Honor citation for Sergeant First Class Leroy Petry. And we welcome him aboard. It's a family weekend. As we'll learn, he's got a pretty full schedule, but he was good enough to join us from his home. Sergeant Petry, thanks for joining us tonight.
Oh, and thank you for having me. It was a treat to meet you guys. I love the picture that we took together.
Yeah, and thanks for. And I should explain to people, because I posted that picture up on Facebook, that we happened to be crossing paths at the same place a couple of weeks ago, and I recognized you, and I stopped, and my wife said, "What are you stopping for?" And I said, "Well, I want Reagan to meet this guy." And, in all honesty, I wanted to meet this guy. But I said, yeah, I wanted Reagan, my daughter, to meet this guy. And you had somewhere to be, and you were good enough to give us, 15 minutes just sitting there yakking away and explaining to my daughter why, she's holding your hand, and it looks like a hand, but it's better than a hand. And you're a great guy about that. And as I've watched you on Letterman and all that since your award, you've been a great ambassador for the Medal of Honor. And so so I'm really grateful that on a family weekend for you give us a couple minutes to talk by phone.
It's my pleasure.
So let me, and the great thing about this show and this audience, this is a very military-oriented show, and the audience does their homework. And I put up your citation on the Facebook page, because I don't want to sit here and dwell on, my sense of it is that, you've told the story not 1,000 times, you've told the story 1,000,000 times now, and that, I sense you're really self-conscious about it. And I want to be really sensitive about that, because what I want to talk to you about is life after the Medal of Honor, your life from that point forward. And, and suffice it to say, if no one knows what I'm talking about, Staff Sergeant Leroy Petry at the time, performed a selfless act that is, frankly, a requirement to win a Medal of Honor. The Medal of Honor is not for you doing your job. If you're ordered to take the hill by yourself, and you take the hill by yourself, that's not Medal of Honor. The Medal of Honor is going above and beyond the call of duty. And what our guest, Sergeant Leroy Petry, did is to literally sacrifice part of his body for his own men by picking up a Taliban grenade, throwing it back before it went off, but being off by a second or two, and losing his right arm below the elbow. So if you don't mind, can we start at that moment?
Absolutely. And there's a little bit before that. Prior to the grenade going off and losing my hand, I was shot through both my upper thighs, and so that's why I was sitting on the ground. And it's actually, with the prosthetic, like you said, it's so advanced that it's almost like a real hand. It's brought back a good quality of life. Different attachments. I play golf with my kids now that I never did before. And it's but it's my legs probably that bother me the most. And that's kind of where a lot of our soldiers are today, is the physical wounds. The ones that are noticeable are easy to notice. But the ones that are what they call the invisible wounds that you can't see are sometimes the ones that hurt the service members the most, both whether mental or physical. But my life is the story continues, as they say. I'm happy to still be alive and still be a part of the U.S. military, and my job title has changed a little bit. I don't get a kick indoors, go overseas, but I took a job where I'm actually taking care of a lot of wounded special operations soldiers in the Northwest. And it's humbling.
But let's be honest. If you wanted to kick in a door, you could kick in a door right now. You could go to downtown Tacoma and you could kick in a door if you wanted to kick in a door. So tell me, and I should tell the audience that you have a total of 28 months deployed as a Ranger in 2nd Ranger Battalion out of Fort Lewis, and so the May 26, 2008, your Medal of Honor action, that was not your first throwdown. You had been in in tangles in Iraq, 2 tours in Iraq, multiple tours in Afghanistan. So let me ask you about the Medal of Honor action. Was that the worst firefight you'd been in, whether Iraq or Afghanistan?
No. There have been a number of close calls, and a lot of our missions we're going after high value targets. So there's always a higher chance of contact, meaning engagement with the enemy.
And for people that don't understand, when I was an infantryman in Iraq, my battalion had a beat, like a cop. We had an area of operational responsibility, an AOR. It was about the size of L.A. County, and every single day we saddled up. We had to do it for a year and a half in the same place. What Sergeant Petry with the Rangers, what the Special Forces, and what Delta do is they're sent for specific, what are called HVTs, high value targets. And so when they get a mission and they rehearse a mission and they brief a mission, they're going to the hairiest place in Afghanistan that night or that day. In the case of your Medal of Honor, that was a daylight raid. So when you guys saddled up, whether it was Iraq or Afghanistan, there was no question that it was going to be a two-way rifle range, right?
Absolutely. And it's always advantageous for us to fight during the night. And our history has proven that during daylight, you're on a little closer to even terms. So it definitely went through my mind as we were flying out on the helicopters to be prepared for anything that we may take a casualty.
Were you guys, after the briefing and before you got on your helicopters, were you asking each other, why are we doing this in the daytime?
No, everybody knew that everyone is well informed on the mission, the brief, what we're doing, and it was another mission to us. I mean, just like any other one, daylight or night, we were going to execute it with precision. And to be honest, that deployment, our up tempo was pretty high, and I didn't know it was Memorial Day until I had gone into our filled chow tent to grab a few snacks, throw in my pack in case we got stuck out overnight. But it can get really busy sometimes, going out 2-3 times a night to different objectives.
And I guess, the radio station that you're on, KFI here in Los Angeles, this is the epicenter of Hollywood. And I've been beating my head about this for years, but in the off chance that some screenwriter is out there listening and they want to put some realism in their movies, just explain in your own experience, when you're shot in the legs by a Taliban, by an AK-47, I'm assuming, or a grenade explodes in your right hand, is that when the movie ends? Did the credits roll, or were there hours more of combat to go?
Oh, there was still a lot more going on. It was there was still a lot of shooting going on. I was still talking on the radio, giving commands to my guys, and we ended up moving to I ended up grabbing on a guy. We ran off to casualty collection point where that's where we treat our casualties, and there was spread out guys that were injured all around me, it seemed like, and the medic comes running up to me and says, "Hey, let's start treating you." And I'm like, "I'm fine. I already got a tourniquet on my hand or on my wrist, arm, what's left of it." And he says, "Well, we got to take a look at your legs." At that point, I knew I was shot in the left leg. I didn't know I was shot through both the legs. And so I looked down, and my pants are just soaked in blood from the thighs down to the boots. And I said, "Okay, the mind says keep going, but we're running out of juice." And even going getting put in the stretcher, getting carried off to the helicopter for evacuation, our guys are still on the rooftops pulling security. They're still engaging enemies in nearby compounds. I mean, it's not over till you get home in the United States. And even then, nowadays, we got to watch fly everywhere we go.
And they stabilized you, and you flew out to Landstuhl, Germany, where you were for a couple of weeks. When were you sort of out of the woods on the blood loss and the bullet wounds in the legs?
I flew out of the hostile area to a forward operating base, and I was probably there maybe an hour, and then an airplane came in and flew me out to Bagram Airfield. I sat there for a while. I lost consciousness somewhere in flight to Bagram, and then by the time from point of injury all the way back to San Antonio, Texas, where at Brooke Army Medical in the Center for Intrepid, where I got my treatment, it was 4 days total. So I got back home pretty quick.
So you reunited with your wife at San Antonio? It
was kind of, my wife came in for 2 days and then she had to leave me, and I was pretty hopped up on pain meds. So she said I wanted to leave the hospital with her because she had to leave 2 days later to go back. Our oldest daughter was graduating high school.
And do you remember seeing her look you in the eyes?
Yes, I do.
By then, the right arm had been surgically removed
at
that point.
No, the hand was completely gone when it exploded. It was like somebody had taken a circular saw and just sliced it right off. I sat up and I looked at it, and I remember there was just a little bit of skin folded back around the edges, and speaking of LA, it was almost like Hollywood. I was wondering why it wasn't squirting in the air, but realized that I had to take care of it, and I put a tourniquet on it
at the site. And so your wife, I'm assuming, obviously she's overjoyed that you're alive, but she sees that you've been marked by the war that you've been going to several times. So we have to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about the weight around your neck for the rest of your life, and whether it's on a military base or whatever. Sergeant First Class Leroy Petry, good enough to join us on a weekend that is a rare weekend. That's his own time, and we'll talk about that when we get back in a minute. So we'll take a quick break, and we'll come back with Sergeant Petry. Thanks a lot for joining us again. Hang on, we'll be back in just a second. This is Bryan Suits on the Dark Secret Place in KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk radio. Thanksgiving. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk radio, the Dark Secret Place. Bryan Suits in here until 10 o'clock. Our guest, Sergeant First Class Leroy Petry, Medal of Honor recipient for actions in Afghanistan in 2008, and a weekend at home. And the reason that's significant, I guess, Sergeant Petry, explain, well, first of all, to people who are wondering why it is that a guy can lose his arm in combat yet stay in uniform, you're not the first. There are, in fact, now many Marines and soldiers, combat arms guys, who have petitioned to stay in, pass the PT test. So explain that process to people.
It's well, a lot of people would have been medically boarded and sent on their way out into the veteran world, but the military realized, and I think it's they realized they were losing a lot of people that still had the knowledge, the talent, the experience that they could share with others. And not only that, but medical advances have gotten the technology is so far advanced that you can get these prosthetics that have you do just what you were doing before.
Yours was astonishing. You demonstrated to my wife and my daughter and I the dexterity of yours, and explain, because you have your right elbow, right?
Yes.
And so explain how it is that this prosthetic that you just slipped on, how is it reading your arm and translating that into individual fingers waving around? It was amazing.
It's got little sensors that are built into the prosthetic, and as I slide my limb into the casing, it senses the muscle movement. And so as I flex the same muscles that I would to move those fingers, it picks up the sensor, sends it to the hand, and it automatically does it. And I got my first hand in 2008, and to see the advances just in the past 5 years have been phenomenal. They keep updating them and keep upgrading to make a better hand and a better product for the end user, like individuals like myself. And
you're about 34.
Yes.
And so obviously, that's what's amazing is the arm that you showed us, the arm that you're wearing right now, I'm assuming, that's not it. It's not like that's what the arm you have for the rest of your life. They're only going to get better and better and better and better. So do you have any idea 10 years from now what the prosthetic limb that you're wearing might look like?
I think they're it's going to be pretty advanced, but at the same time, they're medically advancing in transplants as well. And I believe the transplants will outweigh the prosthetics in the future.
That's true. You think you might have if someone who says I would give my right arm to meet Leroy Petry, you might actually say okay.
Oh, I always joke with people when they say, "Let me give you a hand," and I said, "I'll take a right one." But I have a friend of mine. He was one of the first quad amputees, lost both arms, both legs, and 4 days before Christmas last year, he had a double arm transplant. And I went hunting with him about a month ago, and he is doing phenomenal. He is amazed the doctors at how fast he's advancing. And a lot of that's because of the good spirit and attitude toward a recovery. He already has developed a resiliency.
And I should explain to people, because in 2013, less than 0.5% of Americans have served in uniform, and an even smaller percentage have served in combat. You, inspired by a cousin, you joined the Army specifically to get in the Rangers. And for people who don't know, life in the Ranger Battalion is it is complete, total immersion into a warrior culture. Rangers don't do anything except blow junk up that's in front of them. And the Rangers are so special in the Army that they're on Fort Lewis anyway, the compound, the 2nd Battalion compound, where Sergeant Petry worked all of his Army career, it's a perimeter within the perimeter. It's its own fence. It's a total warrior culture, which is why the Rangers are the best infantry on earth. And amongst those guys, now you come back with the heaviest piece of metal that America can issue a soldier, the Medal of Honor. So, amongst guys in uniform, guys like me, guys who have deployed, we look at you, and this is a part where I know you're going to be self-conscious about this, but we look at you with reverence, because you're representing that medal with extraordinary honor and grace. But now when you're amongst your peers in the Ranger Battalion, how do they treat you?
Except for the younger guys, a lot of my peers, they know I'm the same old Leroy. Nothing has changed, and I didn't get a big head. And in fact, I have our family has a Yorkie, and I took it to work one day, and I don't know why, but a lot of the guys were giving me a hard time. They were, "Hey, Sergeant Petry, how come you have your cat on a leash?" And so they treat me normal. It's obviously they have the respect, but for the rank and for the medal, but it's they know it's at times that's sometimes just what I like.
A lot of guys are
comfortable
these
with
days.
my guys.
A lot of guys have trouble after they've gone over there and they've seen what they've seen and they've lived that life. They come back here, and if they keep the uniform on, they can keep an even keel. But a lot of guys take the uniform off, and their life comes apart. Are you in touch with guys maybe that you served with who are just flailing when they're out of uniform? They lost that touchstone.
A lot of guys say that they have a hard time, and that was a part of the decision of staying on active duty. Was I didn't want to have that regret of not having the opportunity to serve more time. And a lot of guys that get out, they tell you time and time again, even guys that have been retired for 40, 50 years, they say, I miss it. And the part they miss is the camaraderie, being around the guys and having that team that'll give 100%. And a lot of what I'm trying to do now is advocate to hire veterans for that sheer reason that their attitude, and if there was 40 hours in a day, they would work it just to complete the work and complete the mission. And there's just a strong attitude. They miss that peers next to them that have the same attitude. And I don't know. It's hard to say that you take off that uniform. It makes it easier if you get involved in some of these veteran organizations or a lot of businesses now corporate industries have a veterans network to support each other, and that's where you'll still find the support, is being around guys who have been there and done what you've done and seen some of what you've seen.
When you were told that your paperwork was going up the chain and it looked like you were going to get that award, and then it was official that you were going to get it, what did it feel like? A bell rung on your head, or that your life changed, or did it just feel like, it's just another day?
Well, I had heard when it was going up, and for me, I kind of thought about it for a minute, and I said, if it goes through, that's great. I'm not going to count my days and wonder where it's going all the time. I'm going to keep living my life as if it had not gone through, and it'll be a surprise if it does come through. And I don't want it to change who I am, but better yet, use it as a tool to help others.
So you would never discipline your kids and say, I didn't win the Medal of Honor so that you could leave the toilet seat up? No. I would, one, and this is a lot of recipients will say it's not a one award anyways. It's a that's true.
You
correct. Yeah, I'm sorry. You corrected me 3 weeks ago, and I'm in the habit of saying that. But you're right.
No, you're okay. I won't use that to my advantage with them.
Like I tell people, I won the Purple Heart because I just stood there. That's all you have to do to win the Purple Heart. Just stand there. So, well, Medal of Honor recipient, Sergeant First Class Leroy Petry, thanks for joining us. Also, I think the greater honor, you have a street named after you in Steilacoom, Washington, and I was on that street today. It was emotional.
I'll tell you, like you said, it is a heavy medal to have around your neck. But what I tell a lot of people makes it lighter around mine is knowing that it represents all those who are serving and who have served, and the sacrifices they have endured in their families.
And that's great. And like I say, on a personal level, you made an impression on my daughter, and that to me, I'm eternally grateful. It was really cool meeting you, and I hope to meet you real soon. Again, all right. Well, have a good weekend, and thanks so much for the time you gave us.
You as well. Thank you.
All right, Sergeant First Class Leroy Petry, 2nd Ranger Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment, Fort Lewis, Washington. We'll be back in just a minute. It is the Dark Secret Place. Bryan Suits back with the latest, this agreement out of Geneva, Switzerland for Iranian nuclear development. That and more coming up in the KFI Newsroom. Michael Crozier has the latest. KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk radio, the Dark Secret Place. Again, a big thank you to Sergeant First Class Leroy Petry, Medal of Honor recipient, because we didn't get into it too much, but sort of one of his jobs in the Army is basically to represent special operations and Medal of Honor awardees, and it's just as a coincidence he happens to be on Fort Lewis, Washington, where the newest Medal of Honor awardee, Staff Sergeant Ty Carter, also is on active duty, and these guys, they're still in the Army. And in the case of Sergeant First Class Petry, he wanted to remain affiliated with the Ranger Regiment and Special Operations Command, and so when you want to get him on your TV show or whatever, you talk to the Ranger Regiment, and they're very protective of their own guys. They want to make sure that the right people are going to talk to him, and so that he can shine, because he as I say, within the warrior culture that is not exactly celebrated by the average American today, even though we're at war and been at war now, for 12 years. In certain parts of this country, people like him are still, to this day, venerated. In other parts, people are sort of ignorant about what the Medal of Honor and they're certainly ignorant of what a U.S. Army Ranger's life is like on a day-to-day basis. So I would just tell you that as someone with a long-time association in the U.S. Army and combat arms, never gone to Ranger school. I've never been a U.S. Army Ranger. I've got loads of friends who have gone to Ranger school, which is a school. And then I've got a handful of friends who served in the Ranger battalions. And I measure the guy that we just talked to by their reaction. And I'm talking about adult men. I'm talking about a friend of mine A friend of mine who was, as a young guy, was in the Ranger battalions, 2nd Battalion, jumped into Grenada, got his wartime in the Ranger Battalion. Then he went Special Forces. He was a Special Forces warrant officer, career warrant officer, now retired. And he literally lives about a block away from where Sergeant Petry lives. And he's giddy like a little boy when he reported to me, because our guest, Sergeant Leroy Petry, he drives a Jeep and it has Medal of Honor license plates, right? We didn't have time to get into the story, but he actually got pulled over by some a-hole cop who got on him because he had those plastic covers on his license plates. Well, he has the plastic covers on his license plates because he doesn't want anyone to vandalize his Medal of Honor license plates. But the cop pulled him over and said, "Hey, get those covers off your license plates, off your Medal of Honor license plate." So he tells a guy with a prosthetic arm, "Hey, right here, right now, with a Phillips head screwdriver, take those off." And he doesn't even help. True story. That's the life of a Medal of Honor winner. But anyway, it's like I say, my friend, who we've actually had on the show in the past as Baghdad Dave, the retired Special Forces warrant officer, who has all the war stories in the world. But when he sighted his new neighbor, he had to tell me, "Yeah, I saw him in this Jeep. He was just driving by and I waved and he waved back." And so, I mean, if you're wondering where to put this guy in the pantheon of badassitude, then wonder no further than what some of the most elite warriors in this country's military think of him, and other Medal of Honor winners. They are revered. And in fact, the Medal of Honor awardee is saluted by everybody. If a 4-star general walks by Sergeant Leroy Petry, he salutes him, and Sergeant Petry salutes him back. If Sergeant Petry walks into a room and the Secretary of Defense and a room full of 4-star generals are in the room, they stand up. And then he says, "Gentlemen, be seated." That's where the Medal of Honor is in the American military. So it's all the more remarkable that the guy, like I can personally tell you, is self-effacing, very humble, and here's a guy in his hometown in New Mexico. They put up a 9-foot statue to commemorate a 6-foot guy. And, so obviously the temptation for your head to get big would be huge. And I sense that's part of the reason he wanted to stay in the Army, because the Army, to someone like him, it's his home, and he's at home there. And that's where you're grounded. So thank you very much, for joining us, tonight.